So I wanted to show how I got the transform function working with the Algolia extension for Firebase. So it's really simple. The first thing that you'll need to do is install the Firebase CLI, which you can do through npm like so. Then once you have it installed, you'll just want to set up a directory where you'll set up your Firebase project at. So I made a Firebase folder in my home directory. Then all you'll want to do is just run Firebase init functions, and this will get the functions project set up for us. So I'm going to choose Typescript, and I'm going to say yes to ESLint, and then I'm going to install all of the dependencies. And then I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code, like so. All right, and now that we've got this here, we can see all of the files that we need here, but we'll just be adding a function here. So let's go over to the source and then to the index file. And then once we're in here, let's see, we can uncomment this and we can get rid of this. And let's go ahead and set up a function as if we were trying to transform a post. So let's name this transform post. Let's change this to onCall. And then let's change this to just have payload. And then one thing we can do in here is we can keep this log statement, and we could just print out what our payload actually is. So we won't need this anymore. And then at the end, if we want, we can just return the payload and it will continue on to our Algolia index. So what we'll want to do is, for example, sometimes you'll want to check the status on something like, is this post live? Is it a draft? Something like so. So then what we can do is we can call we can check the actual payload status. So we'll call payload status. And let's say if it is not equal to published, for example, then what we can do is throw an error. So we'll call a functions.logger.info, and we'll say post is not the correct status. And then what we'll want to do is throw new functions.https.https error, and then we can just say a failed precondition. And then for the error, we'll say post is not the right status. And then we could even change this to like a template and say what the actual status is if we wanted to. Cool. So that looks good. And let's get rid of that. So now what it'll do is it'll actually check what it's complaining about how long our line length is. So we'll just spit these out onto just a couple different ones. And then this actually needs to be payload status, not post status. So there we go. That's our function there. So then what we can do is we can upload this function to Firebase. So we'll go back out one, and then we'll say Firebase deploy only functions. And this can actually send it off to Firebase for us. So we'll say yes. And then we'll go ahead and let it lint and then deploy it to Firebase, which may take a second. All right, so now that the deploy is done, we can go over to Firebase and actually see our function. So if we come over to functions, then we can see transform post here. So cool. Let's go over to extensions, and I've already got the Algolia extension configured, but we can reconfigure it and add our function down here. So we'll say transform post here. And I've already got my indexable field set up, so that's all good. We'll click save. So once this is done, we can continue. So now that it's done, it's completely reconfigured. We can see all of our settings here. So the next thing that we need to do is modify some of the information in our store. So let's come over to Firebase database, and I've already got two records here, one that's a draft and that one that is published. So if we come in here and we can just add a character to the content, and this will trigger a resync over to our index. And we can click here, we can add there. And over here in our index, we don't have any records yet, but after we've sent those, we should only get one record over here. And we can see that this is the one with the status of published. And if we refresh a couple times, that other one won't show up. So if we come over here to the functions, you can see if you go to the logs, and if you see here, post is not the correct status, and you can actually see where we picked up that it was the incorrect one. And if you look at the hello logs statement, which has our payload attached to it, you can actually see where it's a draft. And if we scroll down, and this is the other one that was published, and we look at its payload, boom, published. And we didn't get the error there. So that's how you can add a transform function to either make sure a condition is met in the record, or you could transform some of the data in the record before it went to the index. You could use the transform functions like that as well. So hopefully this helped, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.